Hello everyone, I'm Jack Fisher and welcome to my world. And a little over a year ago, I made a series of videos about Ultimate Marvel, a once prominent imprint from Marvel Comics that redefined the comics industry in the early 2000s. And in those videos, I made the case that Marvel should revisit this unique but messy world, not to try to salvage it, but to just reboot it completely. I didn't dare to imagine how such a reboot could unfold. Well, by fluke or coincidence, Marvel announced via Entertainment Weekly that they're revisiting Ultimate Marvel again. In June 2023, Jonathan Hickman and Bryan Hitch, one of the main artists for the original Ultimates no less, are releasing a new series called Ultimate Invasion. Now, as of the making of this video, not much is known about the plot. We just know that it'll involve Miles Morales and the Maker, aka Evil Reed Richards. Both characters are the sole remaining survivors of the former Ultimate Universe, and now they're poised to revisit it. And that's a big deal, because before this announcement, the former Ultimate Universe was officially destroyed during the events of 2015's Secret War, another big event written by Jonathan Hickman no less. Now there were some hints that parts of the Ultimate Universe had survived, but for the most part, it had faded from the larger comic book zeitgeist. And even before it ended, Ultimate had become a shell of its former self, having lost most of its appeal along with its audience. But Ultimate Invasion promises to do more than just offer a nostalgia trip for fans of early 2000s Marvel. Jonathan Hickman is one of Marvel's most acclaimed writers, and Bryan Hitch is one of the most high-profile artists. You do not hire these two to do something small and forgettable. This actually has the potential to be something big and bold, something that Ultimate hasn't been for a long time. And even though I advocated for this in previous videos, I gotta be honest, I have mixed feelings about this announcement. I wasn't even sure I was going to make a video about this, but when I started getting comments on my old Ultimate videos from people who had mentioned this announcement, I decided to share my thoughts. But I didn't just want to react to the news or mindlessly speculate on what Hickman and Hitch will do. I'd just like to offer a balanced perspective, as well as some hopeful expectations. Because there is reason to be hopeful. If you're a comic book fan of a certain age, you remember just how groundbreaking Ultimate Marvel was when it first came out. And you probably remember fondly how much it did for Marvel and for the comics industry as a whole. You could even make the case that Ultimate Marvel helped set the stage for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Much of the aesthetics in those comics ended up manifesting in the MCU. And I really think the comics industry needs something like this right now. I feel like it still hasn't fully recovered from the disruptions caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. And even before that, Marvel and DC Comics were increasingly chaotic with their respective slate of books. And it became increasingly difficult to follow the larger vision of the two mainline continuities. As it just so happens, that's very similar to the situation Marvel was in prior to the launch of Ultimates in the early 2000s. Before then, the comics just felt too inaccessible to anyone who hadn't followed them closely for years. And now that Marvel and DC have major cinematic universes to advertise these characters, there's a real opportunity to draw new fans into the comics. An imprint like Ultimate Marvel could be a perfect avenue for that. But that's assuming a lot about the purpose of this event and how it'll play out. Now, I certainly don't claim to know the details, but I've read enough of Jonathan Hickman's comics to know that he thinks big. And as an artist, Bryan Hitch lives to draw big, flashy spectacles. The preview art of Ultimate Invasion does offer some promising hints. We see the Maker, the ultimate version of Reed Richards who went completely evil, team up with Miles Morales. Even though they're from the same universe, they could not be more different. Whereas Ultimate Reed has not gotten over having lost his world, Miles Morales has been all too eager to move on from it. Now what they end up doing together, and how that leads us back to the Ultimate Universe, that's not yet known. But the preview art also shows Marvel's Illuminati getting involved. And whenever they get together, it's usually an existential crisis in the highest order. But any details beyond that are still unclear. And that lack of clarity is a big reason why I have such mixed feelings about this event. Believe me, I would love nothing more than to see Ultimate Invasion lead to a total reboot of the Ultimate Universe. I would love it just as much if Marvel let Jonathan Hickman spearhead that reboot. After all, he does have some unfinished business with Ultimate. Years ago, in the early 2010s, he actually started a promising run in the Ultimate comics. But by then, there really was no saving Ultimate Marvel. It was already on its third relaunch, and it was still recovering from having killed off way too many characters. It also didn't help that this launch happened around the same time as DC's New 52 reboot. And say what you will about how that turned out, there's no denying that it completely overshadowed yet another Ultimate relaunch. This time, Hickman has an opportunity to start fresh. He's one of the best in the business when it comes to world building. He did it with the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, and the X-Men. With Ultimate Invasion, he'll have a chance to lay the foundation for an entirely new Marvel universe of his own making. And I would totally be on board with that. However, there's also a chance that he'll fall into the same trap that other Ultimate writers have before him. One of the big reasons Ultimate Marvel declined so rapidly is that too many writers kept trying to recapture the magic of those early Ultimate comics. But that just wasn't possible after so many dumb, poorly written events, Ultimates 3 and Ultimatum being the worst. Marvel basically let the writers completely destroy everything Ultimate built in its first 8 years in hopes of rebuilding it into something better, fresher, and unique. But outside of Ultimate Spider-Man, it failed on every conceivable level. It became nothing more than an empty shell of a world, lacking identity, vision, and likable characters of any kind. And after killing off so many of the characters that helped make Ultimate so great, it tried way too hard to fill the void. But again, that was never going to work in the long run. Miles Morales might have been the exception, but nobody else was getting too excited to read about Ray Connor, Monica Chang, Mach 2, Jimmy Hudson, Teddy Allen, or Derek Morgan. And if you don't remember any of those characters, don't worry. You're not missing much. Not one of them is memorable or interesting in the slightest. But therein lies my biggest concern about Ultimate Invasion. If Marvel is going to revisit this universe, there will be a temptation to try and salvage it in some way. Hickman himself might think he can pick up where he left off in 2015 before Secret War, and maybe somehow rebuild the world. I imagine plenty of editors at Marvel and Disney would love to have a thriving line of Ultimate comics again. I don't claim to be very smart. I'm also not exceptionally skilled when it comes to predicting the future. But I am confident in saying this. If Marvel attempts to save the former Ultimate Universe without rebooting it, they will fail. I don't care if Jonathan Hickman is writing it. I don't care if they hire Alan Moore, Frank Miller, Grant Morrison, and the ghost of Jack Kirby himself. That effort will not succeed. Ultimate Marvel, the world that began in 2000 and ended in 2015, it just can't be saved. Sure, revising the old Ultimate Universe could make for a nice gimmick. I'm sure Hickman and Hitch telling new stories in the former Ultimate Universe will attract an audience. Their names and track record with Marvel will garner plenty of attention by default. But, in the long run, I still say it won't work. The novelty will wear off. There's just no way to sustainably build a world that basically destroyed itself with a decade of horrible writing and misguided events. And that doesn't even begin to account for the parts of Ultimate that have not aged well. Remember, Ultimate Marvel was a world in which the Maximoff twins engaged in incest, the Hulk engaged in cannibalism, and Hank Pym brutally assaulted his wife. Even if Marvel wasn't owned by Disney, there's just no way to make that universe palatable in 2023. Now, I'm sure that won't stop someone from trying. Perhaps Hickman even has a plan to retcon or change those less savory elements of Ultimate's past. Maybe he and Marvel's various editors will just ignore it, hoping that older readers haven't forgotten and new audiences won't care. But even if they're right about that, it still won't work. I'm still confident in saying that, because the former Ultimate Universe just has too much baggage and too little long-term potential. That's why I'm really hoping this does lead to a major reboot of Ultimate Marvel somehow. Even if it's not a total reboot, Ultimate needs as clean a slate as possible if it's going to be a viable imprint once more. It needs a chance to start fresh, building a new world, molding new versions of familiar characters, and having a larger vision for it all. One beyond just doing things that can't be done in the mainline comics. Whatever it leads to, I'll certainly be checking out Ultimate Invasion. I do plan on following it closely, and I genuinely hope that it leads to something that will revitalize the comics industry. Because while the former Ultimate imprint may be unsalvageable, the idea of Ultimate Marvel, a new, unique world full of these familiar characters we know and love, that's an idea that's ultimately worth pursuing. Thanks for watching, everyone, and thanks for joining me in my world. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and until next time, take care and stay safe.